Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be giving you my most overrated UFC fighter in every division. Now, I'm just going to be giving you my takes, my overall opinions, all that jazz. So let's just hop right into it. For the flyweight division, I have David Dvorak. Now, you might be asking me, who's David Dvorak? Now, that's a good question. When I was first starting to watch MMA, this guy's not too memorable, even though he was ranked at flyweight. And Steve Erceg beat him on UFC 293, I believe. I still really did not remember this guy. And the only reason I say he's overrated is when I saw this guy got eventually cut from the UFC. I have no clue what happened, but he did get cut. Um, People were in the comments absolutely crying like Brandon Moreno just got cut or something. And I was confused because this guy, no one ever really talked about him. He lost his last three, and I know it was against good competition, but that's still not a good look for your career. And I think those fans are just trying to clinch on to something that's not really there. Now, David Dvorak is a good fighter. He's good on his bicycle. He's good at range using his reach and stuff. He has pretty solid leg kicks. He always bruises up his opponent's leg, but he's proved time and time again he's just not good enough for the top echelon of flyweight. And I know flyweight's not even that hard to get into, and he's still proven he's not good enough. He's been chinned by Mateus Nicolau, which even though Mateus does have some power, it's still a terrible look to get chinned by Mateus. He's always on his bike, and I think that's one of his biggest problems nowadays is that he's so scared of getting chinned again after the Nicolau fight. A lot of his performances, especially against Manel Kape, was really fucking boring. And the only reason the Steve Erceg fight was entertaining is because Steve Erceg was pushing that pace the entire time. But the thing is, David Dvorak, people were overrating him, saying he's going to be top tier, and even though he picked up these early losses, he'll bounce back. But I think he'll prove time and time again he's not top tier. And even though he's cut, I still just want to shout him out one last time as the most overrated flyweight in the UFC. So, yeah. For the bantamweight division, I have Cameron Simon as the most overrated fighter. Now, I know it's not the most unpopular opinion to say that Cameron Simon's overrated after his Payne Talbot loss, but I do think that some MMA guru meat writers are probably thinking to themselves that Cameron Simon, even though he didn't beat an up-and-coming prospect in Payne Talbot, he still has a lot of potential, and he'll probably be an up-and-coming bantamweight prospect soon. But I do not think this is going to happen. Even though Cameron Simon, he has good stand-up, he has good kicks, I do think his jiu-jitsu is very underrated. I do think a lot of what he throws makes him susceptible, yeah, for counters and stuff. A lot of the time you watch him, his punches, he does the same little Dricus du Plessis style where everyone says it shouldn't work, but it works. Cameron Simon does it, and it doesn't work. And it kind of makes sense why it doesn't. He'll do the DDP, head in the air, 1-2 combo, and get absolutely countered up by Payne Talbot. He did that also against Christian Rodriguez. Christian Rodriguez was not good enough of a boxer to do anything about it. He has a lot of looping shots. There's a lot of times where he's using the end of his shots to Izzy, but the thing is he doesn't have that crazy of a reach to be able to do that. So he'll just leave himself open to shots, get dropped a lot of the time. Got dropped by Mana Martinez. Payne Talbot, of course, he got absolutely cooked. And even though this guy's good, I think he needs to switch up his entire style to even be ranked bantamweight. I mean, he has really good kicks. I feel like if he would just keep to the outside using his kicks, using his jiu-jitsu, I think he would be great. But a lot of the time, he uses his stupid fucking DDP blitz to give himself CTE. So that's my bantamweight overrated guy. Let's just move on to the next. Now for featherweight, I do have Sean Woodson as the most overrated fighter. I think this guy is just a split decision merchant, and it pisses me off because I bet on Alex Caceres when he fought him, and I think he won round 2 and 3. But the judges don't, and this guy's from St. Louis, and the fight was at St. Louis, so let's just do the math on that one. But yeah, this guy, he's just always a close fight. He has good boxing, and he has okay kicks. It's just the thing is the boxing doesn't really last too long. He'll usually fade around the third round. He's usually kind of good early and then just fades. At 6'3", he's good, but you would expect a very powerful, very lengthy, kind of aggressive guy. This guy kind of sits back. He kind of uses his kicks. He kind of Anderson Silva's it a bit, using his hands just to fucking fake you out. And even though this guy's good, and even though he can squeak out a split decision whenever he wants, I do think he has no pop whatsoever in a lot of his shots. I don't think he'll be a high-ranking featherweight, as Alex Caceres was boxing him up. And Alex Caceres, even though he's a great fighter, not known for his boxing, but once you start getting a groove on this guy, like on the later rounds, you usually start to piece him up. And yeah, I just think he is good, but eventually he's been kind of getting into too many close fights, and eventually one of these fights are going to go the other way. So Sean Woodson, don't like him. Beat Alex Caceres, and he's boring as shit. So let's just move on to the next one. For the lightweight division, I do have Renato Moicano as my overrated fighter. Now, I know Renato is a pretty silly guy with this Show Me the Money podcast, and I don't doubt it. I just think that people are talking about a title shot with this guy after the Benoit fight, that he'll be next for a title shot if he picks up another win. And just putting this guy in title conversations, in my opinion, is just kind of stupid. Even though I like him a lot, when you look at his last two fights, him on the feet is just something not to ignore. When you watch the Jalen Turner and Drew Dober fights back, every time he's on the feet, he looks like a deer in headlights. He's straight up looking for a way to get that shit to the floor. And I completely get it. That's his game. But the thing is, once you get to the higher rankings of lightweight, that doesn't really work too much anymore. And he's fighting now Benoit St. Denis, and people are picking him to win that. And it's pretty much a 50-50, and that really surprises me. I mean, Benoit St. Denis is a known wrestler who can kind of match his skill in that, while Renato Moicano can't really do anything on the feet. He has a chinny chin. Moicano gets rocked a lot nowadays. I think people don't really realize how his chin is deteriorating. His jiu-jitsu is very good. I think it's probably one of the best jiu-jitsu, probably some of the best jiu-jitsu in the UFC. But people are putting his name in title shot conversations, and it's just like, dude, why would you do that? He's never really going to get anywhere close. He's in survival mode most of his fights. He's low-key looking for just a way to survive, and he gets that a lot of the time. And I'm not going to hold that against him. It's just people are talking about him as a future title contender. You guys get it. He's funny, but he won't beat the top competition. I do have Benoit beating him, and once that fight comes in close, you'll get the full scoop on that. So, for welterweight, I have Michael Morales. Michael Morales, he's pretty overrated. He's 15-0. I think that's why a lot of people see his record, see that the UFC is pushing him, and they just assume that this guy is going to be great. And even though I do think this is kind of my least confident pick in the whole bunch, he has a good jab, he has solid leg kicks, but every time I watch his fights, when I look at a great up-and-coming contender, I want to see dominant performances, dominant showings. And the thing about Michael Morales, he hasn't had a dominant showing yet. He had a great fight against Trevin Giles where he KO'd him, and that was good. That was his only good performance. But the other ones with Jake Matthews, Max Griffin, the Max Griffin one was a little better. It just takes him a little time to get going. And a lot of these fights, he's not really facing the best competition. He's fighting kind of just Jake Matthews, who I haven't seen him throw a kick in all of his fights. Max Griffin, who's a lot like his up-and-coming opponent, Neil Magny, and he was piecing Max Griffin up. But the thing is, he has too many close moments with unranked fighters. I think he can get tagged a lot. He was getting tagged by Jake Matthews, and I think he can get clipped. He got rocked in the Trevin Giles fight, and even though he has a great gas tank, I think his striking's very good. We haven't really seen him on the floor, and once he starts fighting the next level of welterweight opponents, I don't think he'll be able to keep up. I do think he'll maybe be a staple in the welterweight division in the rankings, but I think a lot of these people see him undefeated, see the UFC pushing him, and will just hop on it based on that. So, yeah, I think Michael Morales is the overrated welterweight. For the middleweight division, we have Caio Borralho as the most overrated fighter. Now, this is kind of in preparation for the Jared Cannonier fight that he's headlining in a couple weeks. I do think a lot of people will be talking about Caio as being the next title challenger for the middleweight division and getting the title shot next. And even though I do think he will be a staple in the middleweight division, I do not think this guy will get anywhere close to the championship level. He has a solid jab, he has solid stand up all around. His boxing's good, but he kind of relies on mostly his power. He has pretty solid jiu-jitsu. I think that's one part of his game that's kind of underrated. He submitted Michael Luchacek, and even though he gets submitted by everyone, it still takes a little bit to submit him. So, but the thing is about Kyle Barallo is that his stand-up has always been sus to me. Watching the Abus Magomedov fight, the entire time where Abus is good for the first 2 rounds, Abus has this thing where he'll gas out after the first minute and a half. So once you get past that minute and a half, you're good to usually dice him up like Sean Strickland did. But before he gassed, Abus was doing work to Kyle. Not work, but it was very close on the feet. Kyle was probably winning a little bit of that battle, but it was still very close. He beat Paul Craig. I think that's where a lot of people saw him. And even though that's an impressive performance, Paul Craig has always been one of the most overrated fighters in the UFC. Paul Craig was throwing the exact same body kick over and over. I identified the same slow-ass body kick over and over. And Kyle just kept on spamming this left hook. And even though it did hit sometimes, Paul Craig just started to figure it out. And once Paul Craig starts figuring you out on the feet, he started throwing body kicks and then putting his right hand up to avoid the hook. It's just the thing is, on the feet, this guy is getting the easiest matchups possible to look so great. And now he's going up against guys like Jared Cannonier after Paul Craig, a super overrated light heavyweight. And even though I do think he's pretty good, I see him more as a Paulo Costa type of guy in the middleweight rankings, where he's going to put in a lot of entertaining fights where he'll like stun a bunch of people. But he's not really going to impose his will unless he gets you rocked. And yeah, I just think Kyle Barallo, even though he is a good prospect, he's not going to be a champion like some people will say once this fight's under fight week. So yeah, that's my opinion on that. For the light heavyweight division, I have Khalil Roundtree as overrated now. I think a lot of the Khalil Roundtree hypeness went away after he pulled out of UFC 303, but before UFC 303, people were picking this guy to beat Jamal Hill, and even though I don't think it's the worst prediction, I do think people had this expectation that Khalil Roundtree was a future dark horse champ. But thing about Khalil Roundtree, he is very, when looking at him, you can pretty much get his game. He's very powerful. He has great kicks, fast hands. He's very patient. But Khalil Roundtree, whenever he faces good strikers with competent head movement, competent, just striking in general, it kind of gets tricky. Like, he had a tough time dealing with Ion Cutelaba, who's a solid striker, but he's not too bad. And then Marcin Prachnio dismantled Khalil Roundtree. And in the Dustin Jacoby fight, we saw another example of him getting outclassed again after the first round, where he's just getting tit for tatted up by Dustin Jacoby, hitting him around the third round, where he's just gassed, like limping around the octagon. The thing is about Khalil Roundtree, he's a solid all-around fighter. He's just not going to make it to the top echelon. I've been hearing people calling him a dark horse champ. That's not going to happen. Anthony Smith, even though he wasn't really having too much success at any points in the fight, he was kind of imposing his will. And Khalil Roundtree, even though he was hitting combos, Smith came back with something, like, usually. So Khalil Roundtree is a great fighter, and I do think he has a area around the top 5 of light heavyweight where he could be a solid gatekeeper. But I just think calling this guy a dark horse champ is kind of stupid. And even though he has fast hands, he's powerful, he's kind of a T-Rex. And yeah, so let's just move on to the next. For the heavyweight division, I have Waldo Cortez Acosta being the most overrated. And even though I don't think many people are rating this guy too highly, I just think after the Despain win, to be honest, I could have put the entirety of heavyweight on this list. I just think the entire division is just awful, and a lot of people think it's better than what it is. But I think after the Robelis Despain win, people look at Waldo Cortez Acosta and be like, I know he might not be the best prospect, but beating guys like Robelis Despain, Andrei Arlovsky, those are good wins, and those are probably going to propel him into the top 15. And even though I do think the top 15 is definitely doable for this guy, anything higher than that, I think, is just way overhyping him. This guy's fast. He's 6'4" and fast, which is quite confusing, but he imposes his will well. He's very good moving, and everything else it just kind of mid. His grappling, even though he controlled Robelis to Spain, it wasn't really because he was doing a great job grappling. It was because Robelis had absolutely he had nothing off of his back. The Andrei Arlovski fight, it was close, and even though he was dancing on him the entire time, and you would think that Cortez Acosta was absolutely having a masterclass, it was tit for tat. Andrei Arlovski was doing really well, and just especially on the Rogerio de Lima fight, it kind of showed how if the other guy has any speck of talent in any area of the game, that Waldo Cortez really has nothing against it. And even though he's solid all around, he's just a normal, kind of shitty heavyweight prospect. And even though he has some good wins on paper, you kind of have to assess everything that he's given us, and he hasn't shown he's really particularly good at anything. So my heavyweight overrated person is Waldo Cortez Acosta. So that's the video. I hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe for more. Now that Lucas Tracy's gone, bro, that's crazy. And then yeah, so please subscribe and see ya.